So welcome back then. We're here, of course, at the Constitutional Court in Constitution Hill in Johannesburg, which is warming up quite significantly, actually, at this time. So very helpful for that because the weather has been quite cold. But we're going to continue talking about the Rand manipulation case, which I think is very pertinent to get a hold of, because if we get to understand why this matters to you and I every single day, we'll begin to take more cognizance of this case and what exactly the Constitutional Court is going to be hearing over the next 4 days. So we're going to ask Harry Scherzer, who's from Future Forex and is the CEO then, to unpack this for us and get a lowdown of the understanding for us. We spoke a little bit earlier to the Competition Commission's head of cartels, Harry. Good morning to you. And he was detailing why this matters so much from an economic perspective. Let's just talk about how this can happen. How exactly can companies, 28 banks effectively, collude in such a manner and rig or manipulate a currency?
Good morning, Arabile. Great to chat to you about this. Look, the truth is it shouldn't happen. That's the answer. So it's quite remarkable that this was able to happen. And practically all that really happened here is that a bunch of independent banks came onto a instant messaging service on Bloomberg's terminal and, well, allegedly started saying what price they wanted for the Rand dollar, which is not at all the way it should work. In a perfect competition society, what should happen is each bank should independently say what price they're going to give. And as a result, the consumer gets to decide between a number of banks which bank to use when sending money into or out of the country. But here you have every bank talking to each other and really fixing the prices. And so this is something that absolutely shouldn't have happened. And it will be quite a knock for the banks if they are proven to have been guilty in doing this in the years 2007 to 2013.
Yeah, and with the case being where it is now, because the big issue is still around jurisdiction, they're actually still arguing the initial case in some parts of this. But today, it's really an appeal around 13 of these lenders. Have we gotten to a point where the fight just has lost its way a little bit? Because it feels like jurisdiction should be the main aim here. And if South Africa and its Competition Commission is unable then to prosecute this case, then does that not leave the Rand to its own devices? Anybody can trade it anywhere in whichever manner they please.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Arabile. I think the reason that 12 years on we're still fighting tirelessly to have this case won is to set a precedent, to show these international and local banks that they can't manipulate the Rand. They can't fight with our government and get away with it and really rig things. And so I'm quite proud of the Competitions Commission for fighting this 12 years on, because we can't have banks, as you say, doing whatever they want to our currency at the expense, if I may add, of businesses, of importers, of exporters, of investment into the country. It's basically taking money from everyone in the country, which effectively reduces our GDP at the expense of upping the pockets of shareholders of banks or of the direct employees of banks, probably. So really, this is something that I think should be fought right to the end, to make sure that people and banks don't try to do the same ever again.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about the impact. You've just highlighted it, and I think the significance of that impact on everyday lives is what people will harp on about it. I don't want it to be that 2008 financial crisis situation where it's just something that feels so distant, so far, that was just caused by banks, and now we're all suffering, but we don't know why. The impact over the last 12 years could have actually been massive. It could have affected everyday goods, as you said, imports and exports, meaning that the price of goods that we were having in South Africa could have been changed massively so because of this case. Let's just talk about the impact.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if everyone's having to pay more than they should because banks are coming together and say, we want everyone to pay this price rather than letting the market work its magic, you have a situation where everyone's paying more for imports, more for exports, more for investment. And it does two things. Number one, to the everyday person, it increases the price of goods in the shop because we have to import some of those goods, and that import cost is a bit higher, which in turn results in higher prices. But number two, what it does is it reduces our GDP and our growth. And as you know, when things grow, they grow exponentially. So imagine if each year things have been growing more than they did before, we might have been in a different position than we are now. And the good news is that this is a case looking at issues from 2007 to 2013. That's when this allegedly happened. But there's still an effect, a follow-on effect from everything that was done wrong in those years, which would affect us today. And so I do believe that banks still need to be punished for that, not only because of what they did, but also because it sets a precedent not to do it ever again, because we can't have this again as a South African economy and society.
Harry, I want to take us back to perhaps a time before both of us ever followed the currencies a little bit, and that's really around 2001 when then President Thabo Mbeki actually instituted a commission of inquiry which was aimed at talking about the depreciation of the currency, which had depreciated remarkably. It was just around 8 Rand to the US dollar, and that moved significantly to 13 Rand 50 odd against the US dollar, and there was a commission of inquiry then. The report there, the official report, spoke to no action needing to be done, although one of the commissioners, Christine Kunta, had actually made note of another report saying that actually there was a lot of depreciation and some sort of collusion in place there. Does South Africa have an issue that it needs to be looking at when it comes to how we regulate our trading of Forex and currencies in order for this not to be happening again? Because it's clearly been happening significantly over the last 25 years at least.
Yeah, so it's a fantastic question, Arbila. And I think what it comes down to is the fact that if you don't have trust in the South African economy, you can't invest in the South African economy as freely. And that's going to cause a Rand depreciation. There's less need for Rands if we don't have trust in our local banks, in international banks coming to South Africa. And really, you're 100% right that we need to nip this in the bud and not let it happen again. And I think being in the Forex space ourselves, we're obviously, as a company, Future Forex, we're all about transparency in this space. And we do believe that the banks tend to intentionally be untransparent. They tend to intentionally misguide people into what they're actually paying to move money offshore by adding a fat spread that they don't really tell you about. And this is something that we're trying to correct ourselves. And I agree with you. It really needs to be corrected at a high level. And maybe regulation needs to be more explicit on what spreads can be charged, because right now, any spread can be charged without explaining to the client exactly what they're paying. So I completely agree with you. And I think some form of regulation and increased regulation will be required in order to increase the trust of foreigners and locals investing in South Africa.
Yeah, just as a final question then to you here, what do you think should be done to any of those who are indeed found guilty? I mean, we've seen the likes of Standard Chartered pay a big fine out to the United States, and I think that was back in 2015, so it was quite some time ago actually, but not so much so here in South Africa. If indeed they are found to be guilty, the Competition Commission had put forward the 10% of their South African revenue as a key fine. Would that be a sufficient enough deterrent? Does that stop them from doing it? Or should there be greater recourse and consequences?
Yeah, so I think whatever's put forward as the fine needs to be something which really and truly hurts the banks. Something which shows the banks that doing this, you will lose. You will lose in the long run if you do things like this, because that's going to be the deterrent we need. So in terms of how hefty the fines need to be, I think the heftier the better, quite frankly. I think it is something that the banks have been for ages doing things that they probably shouldn't have been doing and making tons of money doing so. We know that they are very profitable institutions, banks, and they can afford it. And quite frankly, this needs to be something that actually hurts their bottom line. So they look at it for years to come and think that's something we'll never do again. So I don't have a figure for you, but I can say it needs to be something which hurts their bottom line.
Yeah, Harry, It's going to be a case that we'll watch over the next 4 days. We'll watch with you, and hopefully we'll get some commentary from you as well throughout the case, or perhaps just towards the closeout of this here at the Concourt then. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Harry Scherzer is the CEO of Future Forex, as we continue to talk about the Rand manipulation case, which is now headed to the Constitutional Court, having been sent here by the Competition Commission, believing that anti-competitive behavior was initially held out by 28 banks. Today's case is against 13 of those banks. Those are local as well as international banks involved in all of this.